American style. And we're so glad that you've joined us today. We're living in an interesting time here in this world of ours. All the craziness that's going on in Ukraine and Russia and all of that kind of stuff. But you know what? God is still in control, and we're very blessed to be able to spend time freely worshiping together, doing those kinds of things. It's an amazing thing. So just want to remind you, KXEX 1550 AM, Saturdays at 4, Sundays at 6. Be sure and share with folks. Let them know that you can check in with us then. But we also are heard on Spotify, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, you name it. We can have you listening when it's convenient for you. We talk politics, education, religion, technology, sports, values, and healthy communities. Also, you can catch Good News with Larry Powell 5 days a week, nothing but good news, Monday through Friday at 10 and at 4. Here a Good News story. Hey, we're really glad you've joined us today because we have a very special guest, a good friend of mine, Ashley Swearingen, the 24th mayor of Fresno, who is now the CEO of the Central Valley Community Foundation. Ashley, welcome.
Larry, it is so good to see you in person and in studio.
It's nice to have you with us. We're going to talk a little bit about what you're doing now and things, but we'll talk a little politics too, just what you've been involved in over the past and things. And I know you were born in Texas, so you're a Texas gal, but you're now a Fresnan fully.
That's it. You know, you can never quite take the Southerner, I think, out of the Westerner.
Yep.
Yeah, I was born in Texas. My dad was in seminary when I was born, so so we were in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And then moved to Louisiana, where he took his first church assignment, and then was there just a couple of years. Moved to Fort Smith, Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas, for 10 years.
So you did have a lot of Southern in you.
I did, and family's all in Texas and Oklahoma.
Okay.
And then my dad took a job in Colorado for about 6 months. I was there, and then we moved to Fresno in 1987.
87. And how old were you? No. What grade were you in?
I will say both. I was 14. I was in 9th grade.
Okay, 9th grade. And I know you went to Fresno Christian Schools.
I did. I started at Clovis West and did a semester there and then finished at Fresno Christian.
Fresno Christian. Fresno Christian has just been loaded with kids lately. I mean, they're oversupplied. I mean, we've got an amazing thing happening. The campus is doing really well. They did a good job during COVID and handled all of that really. You know, it's a hard time, but they handled it very well. And so kids got to stay in school pretty much most of the time, but they masked and they did everything you need to do to make sure everybody's as healthy as possible, and they're doing really well. The applications are just coming in like crazy. So
so my nephew is graduating from Fresno Christian in just a couple of months. So I'm excited for him.
Yeah.
My older nephew graduated there a few years ago. My son was there until he went through 10th grade. Now he's at Emmanuel. But Superintendent Brown and the whole team there are very close to our hearts, and you're right, they do a great job.
Great people. I have nieces and nephews who have graduated there, and obviously as a pastor at People's Church, it's on our campus. We're there all the time. And you're right, Jeremy is a great superintendent, really good guy. Well, tell me a little bit, what were you doing before you got into politics?
I was doing what I would call community and economic development, which is trying to figure out what resources do we have in our communities, whether it's at the neighborhood level or the regional level. So, you know, everything from a really great, job training program that's operating at the local level all the way up to regional universities and businesses that are competing throughout the region and selling things in and out of the region. So community and economic development. Started with a nonprofit business incubator, was helping people try to start businesses. From there, went to Fresno State as the director of community and economic development. Since universities are really drivers of intellectual capital and property, and that's really what fuels the economy and a knowledge-based economy. So was there for 8 years and worked on things like the Partnership for the San Joaquin Valley, which tried to get the state government to align with local officials and private sector.
Schwarzenegger actually started that.
That's right, Governor Schwarzenegger, and also working on the Regional Jobs Initiative, which brought Fresno County and City and Clovis together with industry and community groups. And all of that was going well, but man, it was taking a long time. It's like, we could work forever and ever as sort of volunteers in the, the private civic sector and then see things just go in a really wrong direction with local decision making.
Molasses in winter.
Oh my gosh, exactly. So, I mean, for me, it was just a calculation of like, I'm looking for community impact and I'm looking for the story of Fresno to change. And then that the future doesn't look like the past. So what's the fastest path to facilitate that? And it occurred to me that being the mayor for 4 or 8 years would shortcut a lot of the things that needed to be done that we were pushing from the outside.
And,
of local
and it
government.
did.
I think it did.
Yeah,
I think it did.
It really did. Fresno it is, people don't realize this, 34th largest city in the nation. We're not a small burg anymore. We still kind of treat ourselves that way sometimes. And the good part of that is we know everybody, and there's a great connection. Churches in particular are really connected here. We've got a pastor's cluster kind of thing where geographically across the city, pastors meet together and talk about issues and things. So that's really a healthy thing for our community.
It is. I think, the next sort of push for our community is to extend that network that works well in leadership circles, whether it's in government or business or the faith sector, to really connect that with residents in our community that are pretty disconnected from resources and from access to opportunity. And it's almost like there are so many different Fresnos just travel around the city, and you can feel like, oh, this neighborhood feels very disconnected from one that may be even just a mile away. So,
exactly.
Really building that connection with grassroots organizations and residents in our community so that they have access to the same resources, Larry, that you and I do. That's our heart at the Central Valley Community Foundation, and that's one of the big things we're working on.
Well, and we're going to get into some of that stuff, but, it's interesting. Your husband, Paul, is also in radio. Tell us a little what Paul's doing these days. I know he's also a pastor.
Yeah, retired now from the pastorate, but he's been doing radio almost longer than anything else. Although he's doing more, podcasting and new media kind of stuff these days. He's not on radio anywhere right now. He started doing radio when he was 16.
Wow.
So he in North Platte, Nebraska, there was a little one person radio station that needed an overnight disc jockey. And I think it was country music, and he absolutely hated country music. But was not his cup of tea. But man, he really was interested in media and radio, so he got himself over there and worked through night shifts and that sort of thing. Kept the whatever I don't even know the lingo. Kept the vinyl spinning, I guess.
Yes.
Maybe it was taped at that point. Who knows? Anyway. So he did that for a long time and ended up with a radio TV degree from Fresno State, did sportscasting for a long time, was really actually interested in politics and, of course, being raised by a pastor himself, in the church community, really seeing how church and community and politics all intersect is what has been, I think, driving him for a long time. Sometimes that is a good thing. Sometimes it's bad. Sometimes the church is intersecting community in a way that is really helpful. Sometimes it's really not.
No, exactly.
And so that's what he spends a lot of his time talking about these days. And he's doing executive coaching. You can learn more at pastor-paul.com.
I love it. Well, North Platte, Nebraska, my brother-in-law had a girlfriend from, believe it or not, North Platte, Nebraska. What are the chances?
Oh my gosh. I someday want to visit Nebraska. Paul tells me stories of, he's like, there's nothing quite like being in state when there is a home football game. Oh yeah. And it's like the whole city swells to 300,000 people or whatever that can fit in the stadium. Anyway, I've not seen it in person, but it sounds incredible.
And I understand Nebraska is 19 feet high in one section and down below a little bit in the other, so it doesn't have mountains like we do. It's pretty flat.
Flat.
Yeah, pretty flat. Well, and you got a couple of kids. So what are they doing these days? Our
oldest, Sydney, is 22.
22, boy, and I've known you for a long time, and I remember really younger.
Exactly. When I was elected mayor at age 36.
Wow.
And our kids were 9 and 4.
Ooh.
Sydney is now 22, and she's a graduate of Pepperdine University with a major in music and vocal performance.
Is that right?
She is an opera singer and a musical theater aficionado, and would love to make it big, in performing. So she's auditioning and she's hustling and she's working a retail job. Actually, she just quit that, but she's looking for sort of, part-time day job. And then she's pursuing music and acting in LA right now. She may end up out of California in either New York or in Europe.
Yeah. New York is the place.
It is. And as a mom who knows nothing about how to make it in the arts community, but just wants to see her daughter fulfill her dreams, I want her to be wherever that can happen. So, and then our son is 18 and he's graduating high school in 2 months. And he's going to stay home for a couple years, go to Fresno City College. Good. And he's interested in accounting and finance.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, my sister-in-law was an opera singer at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. Did a lot of stuff there. So I know the world of opera a little bit, and it is incredibly competitive. But once you're in, it's such a neat thing.
Yeah.
I was stunned at the performances, and it's a genre that's a little different than what most of us have seen. But boy, once you hear them sing, you're captured.
There's nothing like it. And I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. I mean, my mom was a classically trained singer when I was growing up. She sang in the church and she would vocalize at home and that sort of thing. And most of what I recall about her experience with music was frustration.
Yes.
You know, it was like,
it's hard.
Yeah. And, you know, I remember she told me one time, like, the voice is the hardest instrument to use. Like, like you can, you know, there are all these muscles in the throat that's like the width of a hair and you have to find them and figure out how they work and control them. And watching my mom and then watching what my daughter has gone through, she started when she was 7.
Wow.
Like, these people work so hard. And you know what? And this is not that maybe the topic of today's conversation, but I just want to say, for the artists among us, whether they are poets or painters or dancers or singers or actors, it is really the artists who go before us in society, who help us connect with emotions that then allow people like Larry and Ashley who work in the government sector to solve problems.
Yeah.
Like, we can't solve problems in society stuck in our own sort of like little ways of thinking about the world, but the artists help us open up, feel things we can't otherwise feel, and then like the rest of society works. So anyway, if you know an artist, thank them, support them, love them, and go on Patreon and support your favorite artist.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Listen, you're listening. I can't believe how fast these segments go, but you're listening to Powell to the People, where civility is always in style. We're going to be right back with Ashley Swearingen.
You're listening to Powell to the People. Write it down.
Hey, Facebook friends, we're really glad you're with us. You be sure and hit that share button and send this around the world, because this is going to be a good segment coming up too, and you don't want to miss it, and your friends don't either. Thank you for being here.
On the best talk in town.
Hey, welcome back to Powell to the People. You know, that song is Mark Lowry, used to be with the Gaithers. Great singer. And, you know, it's kind of fun. Some things never change. We kind of usually make that expression like, oh, some things never change. Well, this one is God's love and faithfulness never changes. So really love that music. Mark does a great job. He's a comedian and just has a great ministry as well. You were talking about artists. You have a thing, we have a thing, in fact, through Central Valley Community Foundation, which you want to get to, the Big Tell. I want to talk a little bit about that too. But okay, so you're 36, you're running for mayor. You've got a chance maybe to change some things in a shorter period of time. What was the biggest challenge you faced that you didn't anticipate when you became mayor?
Oh my gosh, Larry. The mindset of our community.
Yep.
And it's not to indict our specific community. I think it's just more a statement of people. You know, it's community, it's culture, it's but maybe a little bit of it is to point out to Fresnans that we really have to take a good, hard look all the time about who we are as a people, where we live as a place, whether or not we're okay with the results we're getting, with the conditions that people in our community, our neighbors, our friends and family, our extended family, like, are we okay with the way that we're living?
Yes.
Second highest concentration of poverty of any other large city in the U.S.
Fresno Unified, second in the nation.
Second in the nation.
Yeah.
You know, the greatest racial exclusion in the economy of any other large city in California, and almost the worst in the nation. Like, we have to hear that. We have to be honest about that. We have to feel it, and we have to decide to be something different. And what I always like to think about is, like, when Fresnans make up their minds that they want something. And a great example is, you'll remember this, I think it was just before I moved to Fresno. People in Fresno decided that they wanted a police helicopter.
Yes.
And I've heard John Oslin tell this story of, like, we, you know, got together, we decided we need a helicopter to help with, you know, with law enforcement. And, you know, we decided we would raise money for that, Operation Skywatch. Everybody banded together. We raised the money. We have a helicopter in the sky now. A lot of people would say like, oh gosh, could you have decided to maybe come together around something else? Because, maybe that's not the best use of resources. But regardless of that point, the point is this: when Fresnans decide they want something,
they go for it.
They go for it. So, when we were pushing significant reform and change, now I will say, we were able to tap into that heart and mindset of Fresno in a way that opened up doors for fiscal reform, for addressing homelessness in a different way, for changing our land use patterns, for redirecting investment into the interior of the city, focusing on downtown and the surrounding neighborhoods. We found a way to get there, but you know what? That opened and closed right back up.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, what I left very proud of the work that we did in 8 years at the city of Fresno, but I also left realizing that there's so much more work to do in changing our minds.
Yes.
And choosing a different future. So that's a lot of what we focus on at the Community Foundation.
Yeah, it's really, really neat. One of the big things that you do, and I had the pleasure of serving on that board for a period of time, parks and recreation. Talk about big initiatives, and that's one thing that Central Valley Community Foundation really works on, is finding ways for the community to work together for the good of everybody, and to try to change the mindset a little bit that, parks and recreation was a huge, huge, huge deal. And we got almost 52% of the vote for that particular initiative, which is unheard of, when you're asking people to give money,
Yes.
So, tell me a little more about that whole thing.
Oh, my
and
gosh.
And are you aware of where we are now with it and what's happening?
I can answer your first question a little bit easier and just say this. That was probably one of the most frustrating and painful experiences that I, at that point, had been through in my community leadership time in Fresno in over 20 years. So much so that in a fury and in a fit of frustration, I was working out at home and doing these ridiculous tricep push-ups, which if you know anything about my ability to do tricep push-ups, you would know that was not a good idea in the first place. And I completely wrecked my shoulder, and to this day it still hurts. And every time it does, I go, Measure P. Anyway, Measure P was both wonderful and tragic, but ultimately victorious.
Yes.
So, and Larry was right there on the front lines every step of the way.
And Wanarambula.
And just bringing people together. And it was a case of the Community Foundation very much supporting resident leaders. And in fact, in this case, it was Boys and Men of Color, Young Men and Boys of Color, an initiative of Fresno Building Healthy Communities, and a number of nonprofits in the community had spent years canvassing neighborhoods in disinvested Fresno. These are kids that were at risk in every which way you can possibly imagine.
And asking a simple question, what do you need from us?
Asking a simple question. And by the way, all of us who would sit around and armchair, what needs to be happening in society today, we would all say oh, those kids, they ought to get out there and find a way to make a difference and stop being, nincompoops on the playground or whatever. And you know what? They were out. These young men of color were out there knocking on doors saying hey, how can we serve you? How can we make a difference in the community? And what they heard overwhelmingly was our parks are a disaster. Either they're non-existent, or the ones that are so dilapidated that we can't use the equipment. We can't play soccer on the field without risking bodily harm. So this comes from this heart of what's needed in the depths of our community. So residents are leading us forward. They collect the signatures, etc. The Community Foundation,
which was unheard of.
And every step of the way, we kept missing deadlines. We don't have enough signatures. And they would say, oh, the clerk is never going to count these in time. We'd be like, well, let's just keep going. And I have to stop and just say, it was Sandra Celadon at Fresno Building Healthy Communities that was the general on the field, pulling people together. And then people like Jolene Tellis and Judy Paraki standing in front of CVS, the arts community in Big Garden, collecting signatures. And it just was this incredible moment of all walks of life coming together in Fresno to lift up parks, got it to the ballot, faced very fierce opposition from political leadership at the time, who, for varying reasons, didn't want to see resources used this way. Got it to 52%. The city says, that's not good enough. You had to get to 2/3. But we say, maybe not, because California courts are starting to say, if residents put something on the ballot, it's a simple majority.
Yeah, exactly.
So when that took 2 years in the courts, but ultimately was decided by the Supreme Court that it passed.
And one of the resources came from Dave McDonald, who gave us $400,000.
More than that. In the final analysis, it was like $850,000.
Is that right? Wow.
Yes, and he was brokering a peacemaking. Speaking of civility, he was brokering peace between police and fire unions, and Mayor Brand at the time had scheduled a meeting to get them together to say, look, I'm doing $800,000 for Measure P. Like, I will get all the Measure P people to sign on to a public safety measure.
So we can support that as well.
So we can support that as well, put the same amount of money in that measure. And at the last moment, political forces prevailed. The meeting was canceled, and we just continued to duke it out. And ultimately, Measure P was victorious.
You know, and it was one of these tremendous excitement. It's almost bipolar. You know, I was really up, and then we're really down. And then we got a little bit of hope, and then all of a sudden we won again.
I know.
So it was like a lot of my friends were going, I don't know what's going on here.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And we had people, in fact, North Fresno actually voted for the measure a lot more than people realize. And you'd think that a lot of times those with resources in town would not, but I think they saw the need. And,
I think so. You know, and it's just not hard. There are moms all over this town who know like what the condition of their neighborhood parks are. And, you know, the newer parts of the community, park standards were changed before those neighborhoods were built. And now developers are required to put in more park space. That wasn't true in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And so, you know, it is very much an issue of like, well, good for you if you live in a newer part of town, you're fine. But can you see people that live just a mile away?
Right.
Can you see that their neighborhood is very different? And can you honor
and under-resourced families? Yeah.
Can you honor that this is a cry from neighborhoods that have been overlooked for a really long time? And you know, thankfully enough people heard that cry, or maybe it was their own, you know, their own self-interest in their own neighborhood. Whatever, we got to 52%.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. Pretty amazing.
It really
was.
Well,
I'm excited because it's one of those generational things, and it's an opportunity for the generations that come after us to see what Fresno did for 30 years, you know, to make a difference.
Yes.
And phenomenal.
And, you know, just after that, and when the courts, I think it was it 2020 or 2021? I think it was the end of 2020, December 2020, we got word that, you know, the measure had been upheld.
Yeah.
And of course, we'd been in lockdown at that point for 8 months. And the only thing we could do is get, you know, a to-go sandwich from Subway and go sit in a park and eat it. And that was other than that, we're at home on lockdown. And we were like, all of us were like, thank God.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
The next time, hopefully we don't have another pandemic in our lifetimes. But now everyone sees the importance of these parks.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, when you think about it, so many families can't go out to dinner. They can't do a lot of those kind of things, but they can take their kids to a park. And if it's safe and they feel good about it, they're going to do that. You know, and that was the big thing holding a lot of families back was they were just dilapidated, not feeling safe. Now they do. We've got some hope coming for a lot. And then one of the things I really like and talk to my friends about was think about the freeways. We're going to have a chance to maybe do some things on the freeway so they look like a good place to be. And people, when they drive through Fresno, they get a better view of what Fresno is all about because they resourced it and landscaped it.
Exactly.
You know, so it's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. Well, we're at the end of our second segment, folks. We're with Ashley Swearingen, the former mayor of Fresno, current CEO at Central Valley Community Foundation. We're going to continue our conversation. You're listening to Powell to the People, where civility is always in style. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Powell to the People. Write it down. People on the best talk in town.
Hey, welcome back. We're with Ashley Swearingen, the former mayor of Fresno, current CEO at the Central Valley Community Foundation, and we're having some good conversation here. Okay, so you became mayor. You're kind of at the point. Okay, now what do I do with my life? And one of the things we've not had in Fresno since Bill Jones is a statewide elected official. I mean, it's been a long, long time, and yet we feed the world. You know, we are a very important cog in California, the economy and everything. So you decided to run for state office. Tell us a little bit about that.
I did. I ran for state controller in 2014 and was a decision kind of multi-part. Number one, was actually very interested in the job. At that point, 6 years into the city of Fresno, dealing with the Great Recession, the threat of municipal bankruptcy, I totally
many
get
cities.
it. Like many, well, in fact, cities in our same situation did go bankrupt, did declare. We were able to avoid it. We learned the lessons of Stockton, for example, and went as aggressively as we could on downsizing city government and sort of navigated the recession in the way that we did. But anyway, we all know, like, you can have all these great pipe dreams, whatever, great rhetoric, great vision of something. If you can't figure out how to make the money work and like what's actually happening behind the curtain, then you're not going to see that come to fruition. So it was a job I was interested in. And then also was just interested in what would it be like to run as a statewide candidate? How would it differ from the local level, et cetera? Didn't love it, to be honest.
You did really well, though.
I did okay. And I'm grateful for that. I think what I didn't love is I just didn't love the partisanship. Yeah. That's just never going to be my jam.
Yeah.
And and I so appreciate, Larry, your show here and the way you've modeled this for so long. But as a person who wants to solve problems, the table I want to be at is at the table of my enemies.
Yeah.
I want to understand the merit-based arguments that they're trying to make. I mean, there's politics and everything, and there's a bunch of, shenanigans, let's say, that both parties do, but there's usually, there's a heart of the matter that, that somebody's trying to advance, that's important, that needs to be heard and considered.
Oh, exactly.
And so I always kind of run to the other side of the aisle to try to understand what that looks like in order to bridge and find a workable solution to move everybody forward. And you just don't get points for that when you're running for a partisan office. So, it was a great experience in that respect to just kind of go like eyes wide open and realize, oh gosh, just the shellac that exists over the partisan mindset that really does hold us back in society. So, learned a lot, and I remember being, obviously praying a lot during that campaign and just not really knowing if it was the right thing, because obviously I love what I was doing in Fresno and am very committed to seeing the change here too. And so I just kept saying, okay, if this door is supposed to open, God, you got to open it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I was like, holding onto the handle, pulling it as hard as I could, like rattling, pounding on it, trying to do everything I could in my power to open that door. And it didn't open. And I was real frustrated. I remember, because, you work hard for something.
Oh, absolutely.
And, you feel like, if we had just had $1 million more, if we had, another week on the clock, we could have won that election. And so I gave myself a day, literally like one day, to be angry about it.
Okay.
So I took the Wednesday, it was after the Tuesday election, Wednesday, all day. I stayed home from work, and my husband went to work, and I just kind of just groused around all day. I was like, that was so frustrating. Well, and just, this person and that person, they could have helped more. And I get to about 5:15, 5:30, and I'm like, now was that like till midnight, or was that just a work day I gave myself to be upset? And I finally decided, okay, I'm just going to cut it off now. And I had this sense of like, you can't say for 6, 7, 8 months, however long it was that I was campaigning, like, okay, if this door is supposed to open, let it open. And then it doesn't, and then be mad about the outcome.
Yeah, really.
Like, so I had a little reckoning with myself and with God, and I was like, okay, fine. It wasn't supposed to open. I'm going to let it go. 5:30 p.m., cut off the, the anger. And then the next day, I'll never forget this. My son's, I think, 5th or 6th grade class, no, 5th grade, took a trip to Sutter's Fort in Sacramento. And this teacher, this God blessed teacher at Manchester Gate, only teacher in Fresno County who would take her kids every year, and they would actually live like pioneers for a full 24 hours.
Yeah.
So I go up there dressed as a pioneer woman, no makeup, sleep on the ground, just cook the meals in an open flame. Back to real life. I spent 24 hours doing that. My son and I got out of that field trip. We're like, we're going to McDonald's. Like, that was the worst 24 hours ever. But it sort of purged my system, cleansed my system of this statewide campaign. I was like, okay, that's done with. Back to work.
Well, you and I both know that there is a bite that gets you in politics. There's something about it that it hooks you. And it feels good being in there, because you get a chance to share your thoughts with a lot of people and maybe make a difference. And I know that I had to crush and push down that desire to run for offices after I was out of county superintendent position, because personally I would like to have done it. But I thought, okay, Lord, you've got other plans and other ways that I can be impactful in the city and the community and do some things. But you just did what Don Shula recommended in his book. You get 24 hours to celebrate a victory and 24 hours to grieve a defeat, and then get on with life, so.
And then go live like a pioneer for 24 hours in Sacramento.
Boy.
And then you'll really have it out of your system.
I love it. That's real reality. That's good stuff. Okay, let's go to the Central Valley Community Foundation. I had talked to you about I was on the board at Fresno Pacific University at the time as well, and on the Central Valley Community Foundation. And we had a director at that time, so we had a CEO. But we knew that there was a high likelihood that was going to change, and an opening was going to come. But you and I had talked about, hey, what would you think about maybe being the president of Fresno Pacific, and obviously it was just very cursory conversations and stuff, but it was a conversation we had. So we knew you were looking for something. And when the opening came at the Central Valley Community Foundation, it was like every one of us there on the board said, wow, this is a natural fit. This is, when you look at your history, which we just went through, Fresno State, all the community organizations that you had worked with, and Central Valley, all of the stuff with the San Joaquin partnership. There was mayor, all that stuff. It was an absolutely hand-in-glove fit to be at the Central Valley Community Foundation because of your knowledge, your enthusiasm, all of the things that you want in a candidate are right there before us. And why would we go anywhere else when you have the perfect candidate right there? And so it all came together, and you're now CEO of the Central Valley Community Foundation with big ideas and big goals. And one of those was a $1 billion effort to try to raise $1 billion for the Central Valley, and it's not just the Fresno Community Foundation, it's the Central Valley Community Foundation. Tell us a little bit about what was going on with that thought of, let's start seeing ourselves as a bigger player in what's happening to change the area where we live in.
Oh, gosh. Well, as you're retelling that story, I'm also reflecting on just what a joy and privilege it is to be at the Central Valley Community Foundation. And just as a board member, you had that perspective of like, oh, hand in glove. I was feeling that too.
Yeah.
In large part, well, for two reasons. First of all, the board itself, and having
it's a good board,
amazing board, and having worked with a number of the board members for a while in other capacities, I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to work for those people.
Yeah.
It is a board that leads, and it is a board that I love serving with. So that was one major consideration for me. The other is I had learned at that point, I was in my 8th year at the city, and I had learned so much about what blocks financial capital from flowing into and through our community. And now I was learning it, of course, in the public sector. And I was realizing, I think over my 8 years, we brought in at least $100 million of above and beyond investment, state and federal, into priority projects, infrastructure,
fantastic.
et cetera. Not to mention the capital that we collectively raised for future proofing and drought proofing our city with our water infrastructure, et cetera. And that was, hundreds of millions of dollars. But I learned that in so many cases, we have dreams, we have ambitions as a community, we have need, no doubt. We do not have shovel-ready, investment-worthy plans and projects.
Yeah.
We talk a good game. We do not turn that talk into focus, detail, literally shovel-ready plans. And in 8 years at the city of Fresno, boy, we packed a lot in, whether it was bus rapid transit or the surface water treatment plant or the Fulton Street reconstruction project or a number of trails, parks renovations, et cetera. And I saw the mechanics of you got to go from idea all the way through to attract the capital.
And that's arduous. That's
it
really
is
tough.
Arduous.
Yeah.
And it's why it doesn't happen, because we have not developed the muscle as a community. We have at that time, I think it's changing, but we don't value it. We look for leaders who stand up on a stump and say the right thing.
Right.
We don't interrogate their background and their experience to actually do anything even remotely close to what they're saying they want to do.
Sure.
So I have I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what's missing from our community. And I was literally thinking to myself, I want to be somewhere where I can continue to coach, support, lead the charge, do whatever I need to do to attract financial resources into and through the dreams and ambitions of this community. And the Community Foundation does exactly that.
It is
so the perfect fit.
Yes, it is an absolutely perfect fit. So the Community Foundation came up with this $1 billion goal. A lot of money has been raised since that goal was started. And the whole idea is to vision something bigger than anything we've ever thought of in order to really fundamentally change where we live for everybody. And to, the rising tide lifts all boats, kind of thing. Excuse me. And trying to find a way to help those that are less fortunate than we are. I'm never going to go hungry. I'm resourced. God has blessed my life. Dot and I are in great financial shape. We were able to give over $100,000 in charitable donations last year. We've been very, very blessed. And I just wish that we could get a lot of other folks. Now, we have at the foundation hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of donors. Tell a little bit about how do you, whoops, we're out of our third segment here. Folks, we're going to come right back with our final segment with Ashley Swearingen, our 24th mayor, current CEO of the Central Valley Community Foundation. You're listening to Powell to the People, where civility is always in style. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Powell to the People. Write it down.
Jose, I'm assuming this last segment's a little shorter.
Just 1 minute.
Okay.
People on the best talk in town.
Well, welcome back. We're concluding our hour with Ashley Swearingen, the former mayor of Fresno and good friend of mine and the current CEO of the Central Valley Community Foundation. I'll tell you, there's just not enough time to talk about the good things that are actually going on in Fresno in an hour and trying to do that. But Ashley, we were talking a little bit about doning. How do we recruit more people to put money into the foundation so that they can see the benefits that the foundation is trying to achieve?
I think it's just a matter of awareness. We're doing some research right now to answer just that very question and kind of figure out. By the way, when we say we need $1 billion, that number is actually grown to $4 billion over 10 years. And it's not limited to just individual charitable donations.
Right.
We know that would be too big of a
grants,
lift. But exactly. It's really about aligning our existing resources. Like, for example, we've, Measure P, Measure C is coming up for renewal. We could align Measure C dollars, towards a bigger vision than we've known in the past. New state and federal dollars coming in. Foundation dollars from outside of the area, statewide foundations, national foundations, and then, of course, our own local donors.
Right.
But what we know is that so few people know what we actually do, or that so few people even know that there is a Central Valley Community Foundation. But if you could just think of it this way, we're a financial institution. It's a charitable financial institution that exists to facilitate any type of philanthropic investment in our community. So the range of tools we have at our disposal, whether it's a donor advised fund or it's a field of interest fund or it's some other sort of way to facilitate a donor's intent to positively impact the community and then making sure those dollars land in the most impactful way possible. That's kind of the go-between role that we play. So folks can look at our website, Central Valley CF, as in Community Foundation.org, centralvalleycf.org. And then Fresno Drive is the big project you're talking about, Larry, that we provide a lot of support to, and it is bringing over 150 organizations together, all in pursuit of inclusive economic development. And that website is fresnodrive.org.
And you had meeting after meeting after meeting of trying to find, okay, where's the balance between all the groups, special interest groups in Fresno, so that everybody wins. And there's another arduous task, trying to figure out how do we get everybody to be on the same page on something where you still have special self-interest groups out there that want to benefit from the money that comes in and things, but how do we make it so everybody benefits? That was an amazing conversation.
Oh my gosh, that was 2019. So we come off of 2018, Measure P, which took several months, if not years, off of both of our lives, and then we rolled into 2019. And what that simply started as asking ourselves a question at the Community Foundation, and the question was, what would it take to fundamentally transform our economy so that everybody wins?
Yeah.
And we realized, we alone can't answer that question. We need a lot of other community voices and experts in the room to help answer that question.
Yep.
That turned into the Fresno Drive Initiative. And probably the most powerful and indicting and painful, and still to this day, question, issue, etc., that we're trying to get our arms around and understand better and differently so that we can change this, all surrounds this issue of racial disparity in the economy.
Right.
So if you look at who does well in our community and who doesn't, in Fresno, more so than any other large city in California, and almost of the 274 large cities in the U.S., we're 268th for economic inclusion. So that means if you're a person of color, you're least likely to do well in our community, more so than any other place in California. Now, you just got to stop and ask yourself, what is going on? Why? Why? And there are folks, I've learned, there are folks that are upset if you're asking that question. And there are folks that are upset if you're not asking it the right way. I mean, there's just all kinds of, work that has to be done. But the bottom line for me is that is a data point that is only getting worse.
Right.
I don't know the answer, but I know that I got to sit and listen, and I got to ask people who have different pieces of the answer, and we have to come together as a community.
Well, if you're ever going to end generational poverty, you have to answer that question.
You
it's
have
really
to answer
simple
it.
Because we need successful people in all walks of life in order for the community to be successful.
Yes.
And I think it's kind of a simple thing in some ways, and yet very difficult. It's like trying to grasp a vapor with a butterfly net. You can see what the problem is, but trying to find a way to get everybody on board with all the special interests that are out there is very, very tough. And I think a part of it is partisanship, when we need to really start looking at Fresno-ship,
Oh yeah, I like that.
And what can we do? And I think a lot of times we've gotten so bitter, and that's why I'm doing this show, is because of civility is always in style. When we talk to each other, we actually can come up with solutions.
Yeah.
We can actually do some things that are good for everybody. And I remember the day when politicians disagreed with each other but went to dinner together. Now, if you went to dinner together, you might have your food poisoned.
Gosh,
it's so vitriolic.
It's so true. And we all have that same reaction. When you say that, literally my insides just curl up and want to die.
Yeah.
It's so unhelpful and unhealthy. We all know it, and yet it doesn't seem to be changing. And so to me, when that is happening, that means it's a cultural issue. It's bigger than any one person.
Absolutely.
So that it means that those of us who want to see that resolved, we have to go at it from a cultural standpoint.
Yep. And
it does mean deep dialogue. And I've been thinking a lot about just the sort of, there is something in a collective group's consciousness, like whether it's a business, you think about business culture.
Sure.
It's no different than a community's culture.
Absolutely.
It's just it's sort of the collection of how everybody seems to think about something. That's our culture, right?
Yeah.
And in Fresno, it ought to be the case that we can say, hey, the folks in Sacramento or the folks in DC, they're not getting it right. We're not going to probably mess with that too much from where we sit.
Right.
But we can sure as heck change the way we think and talk to one another in Fresno.
Yes.
And if somebody has something that needs to be said that's really hard for me to hear, guess what? I'm going to sit there and I'm going to hear it.
No, exactly.
I'm going to work to listen. And it's no different than the conflict I would have with my daughter or my husband. I mean, it's not wonderful to hear that you really hurt someone or that you really missed something, but do you do it to fight for that relationship? Of course you do.
Yes.
So just transition that kind of thinking to your neighbors, to people you don't know, but that share a city boundary. And that's the kind of reconciliation skill and value that has to drive our community.
No, I agree. We're down to just a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to cover a couple of things from the big $4 billion to the big tell. Tell us a little bit about the big tell.
The Big Tell is one of my favorite things we do all year at the Community Foundation. We make small grants to local filmmakers. Some of them are amateur, and some of them are very sophisticated, doing like really great work for corporate clients or in film or in art, film, whatever. But we pick 10 films from throughout the 6-county area, 10 filmmakers and their stories. We give them a $5,000 grant, and they've got 2 months and a professional coach to make that mini documentary. They're 5-minute films. And then we've been airing them like last year on KC24, the year before on Valley Public TV. They're at thebigtell.org. You can go see. We've done it now 5 years. So you can see 50 mini docs, some of the coolest stories.
They're really great.
They are really great.
Yeah.
You think, gosh, I never knew that little piece of our community, but leave it to a filmmaker to tell an unusual story that makes a big impact. Yeah,
and every kid now, teenager, has their own film machine in their iPhone, or their, smartphones now can do so many different things. And we also get to see their perspective. And I think that helps us as well. You've also got the core initiative. You've got an impact with media and a whole bunch of things, pro neighborhoods. When I started looking at the Council of Business, that you work with, all of the things that are going on, there are so many things. I really would encourage people to go to your website, which is
centralvalleycf.org.
Yeah, centralvalleycf.org. Go there and just see how you might participate and get yourself informed of what's going on, because some really good things are taking place, and you can be a part of that. There's a place. Yeah, I don't care if you've got $50 or $100,000. There's a place for you to be a part of this. And wouldn't it be nice to look back 25, 30 years from now and say, I was part of a solution that got Fresno on the map in a whole different way, that families became successful. We had parks and recreation. We had lower crime. We had a whole lot of good things taking place. And it was because people came together to do the right thing at the right time.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Let's live just like a little bit for each other, right?
Wouldn't
That's
that be
the
neat?
Story.
Well, we've had a delightful time. With us today has been Ashley Swearingen, the 24th mayor of Fresno, current CEO of Central Valley Community Foundation. Ashley, thanks so much for joining us. We love what you're doing. Looking forward to hearing more about it. So when you've got something special, let us know. We'll cover it. But glad to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. All right. Take care. We will see you next week.